Hey everyone, and welcome back to Noble Heart Stories. Today, we're diving into a story that proves how a single secret meeting can ripple through time, changing lives in ways no one could ever predict. This isn't just a story about secrets, it's a story about courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that tie us together. Our story begins in the spring of 1943, in a small, occupied town nestled in the French countryside. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to hold a secret. In this town lived a people from entirely different worlds. First, there was Elise, a young librarian whose quiet demeanor hid a fiery spirit and a deep love for her community. Her life revolved around books, but she yearned to do more, to fight back against the darkness that had fallen over her home. Then there was Jean-Luc, a baker known for his warm smile and even warmer bread. He was a pillar of the community, a man who knew everyone's name and story. But like Elise, Jean-Luc carried a heavy burden. He was secretly part of the local resistance, using his bakery as a hub for passing messages and supplies. Their paths had crossed many times in the town square. A polite nod here, a brief hello there, but they were essentially strangers. That was all about to change. One evening, as dusk settled over the cobblestone streets, Elise found a small, folded note tucked inside a book she was reading. It contained just a few words. Midnight. The old bell tower. Come alone. There was no signature, no clue as to who sent it. Her heart pounded in her chest. This could be a trap, a fatal mistake, but a stronger feeling, a sense of duty, urged her to go. She knew she couldn't stand by any longer. Meanwhile, Jean-Luc was preparing for the same meeting. The message was his. His network had identified Elise as a potential Elise one trusted, intelligent, and fiercely patriotic. But recruiting a civilian was a huge risk. If he misjudged her character, it could mean the end for his entire resistance cell. As he closed his bakery for the night, the weight of his decision pressed down on him. The lives of his friends, his family, and now possibly this young librarian, were all in his hands. The bell tower stood silhouetted against the moonlit sky, a silent watchman over the sleeping town. Elise's hands trembled as she pushed open the heavy oak door. The air inside was cold and musty. She climbed the winding stone staircase, each step echoing in the silence. When she reached the top, she saw a figure standing in the shadows, looking out over the rooftops. It was Jean-Luc, the baker. For a moment, they just stood there, the unspoken tension hanging between them. Elise was stunned. She had never suspected the cheerful baker of being involved in something so dangerous. Jean-Luc finally broke the silence. His voice was low and serious, completely different from the friendly tone she was used to. He explained who he was and what he represented. He told her about the resistance, about their fight for freedom, and about the sacrifices it demanded. He didn't sugarcoat the danger. He spoke of capture, of loss, of the constant fear they lived with. Then, he looked her straight in the eye and asked for her help. He needed someone to manage their coded communications, to receive and decipher messages, to be the intellectual heart of their operation. It was a role her skills as a librarian made her perfect for. Elise Ned, her initial fear slowly transforming into a steely resolve. This was it. This was the chance she had been waiting for. She looked at Jean-Luc, a man she barely knew, and saw in his eyes the same burning desire for justice that she felt in her own heart. Without hesitation, she said yes. In that moment, in the secrecy of the old bell tower, a pact was formed. A baker and a librarian, united by a common cause, their destinies now intertwined forever. This secret meeting was just the beginning of their journey, a journey that would test their courage, their loyalty, and their very souls. Over the next year, Lisa and Jean-Luc became an inseparable team. By day, they maintained their public personas. Elise would stamp books and help patrons at the library, while Jean-Luc would knead dough and sell croissants, exchanging pleasantries with the occupying soldiers who were none the wiser. But by night, the library and the bakery became nerve centers for the resistance. Elise used her knowledge of literature and history to create complex codes based on obscure texts, making their messages nearly impossible to crack. She would receive radio transmissions from London, her ear pressed to the receiver in a hidden back room, transcribing the crackling static into life or death instructions. Jean-Luc, in turn, used his delivery route to move everything from coded messages baked into loaves of bread to weapons and supplies for agents in the field. His bakery, with its constant flow of customers, was the perfect cover. Together, they orchestrated supply drops, helped downed Allied pilots escape across the border, and sabotaged enemy operations. They were a perfect partner. Shilis the strategist, Qinglu the operator. Their trust in each other became absolute. They shared their fears in hushed whispers and celebrated small victories with a shared glance across a crowded room. A deep, unspoken bond grew between them, forged in the crucible of shared danger. But their success did not go unnoticed. The occupying forces grew suspicious. There was a leak, a spy in their midst. Raids became more frequent, and near misses became a daily occurrence. The noose was tightening. One frosty morning, the dreaded moment arrived. Soldiers burst into the bakery. Gungluk, acting on a split-second instinct, managed to burn the most incriminating documents. Just before they broke down the door, he was arrested, dragged out into the street in front of his neighbors. From the library window across the square, Elise watched in horror, her heart shattering into a million pieces. She knew the protocol. If one of them was captured, the other was to disappear, to sever all ties and protect the network. Fighting every instinct to run to him, Elise held her ground. She had to honor the promise they made. She had to ensure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. With tears streaming down her face, she gathered her emergency supplies, destroyed the last of her own codes, and slipped out the back of the library, melting into the countryside. She was now a ghost, a fugitive, but she carried with her the mission and the memory of the brave baker who had trusted her with his life. The war ended. But for Elise, the silence was deafening. She never learned what happened to Jinglu. She searched through records, asked returning prisoners of war, but it was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. She assumed the worst. She rebuilt her life, but the ghosts of Zhongluk and their shared past was always with her. She became a history professor, dedicating her life to telling the stories of the unsung heroes of the war, always making sure the sacrifices of ordinary people, like a brave baker, were never forgotten. Decades passed. Elise was now an old woman, her hair white as snow, but her eyes still held the same fire. One day, she received an invitation to a ceremony in Paris, honoring the surviving members of the resistance. She was hesitant to go, the memories still painful, but she felt an obligation to represent those who couldn't be there. At the Grand Hall, surrounded by other veterans, she felt a profound sense of connection and loss. As a government official read out a list of names, honoring them posthumously, she heard a name that made her stop breathing. Jinglu. The official began recounting his story. His capture, his refusal to talk, despite brutal interrogations, and his eventual escape from a prison camp in the final days of the war. And then, the official said something that changed everything. And we are honored to have his son here with us today to accept this medal on his behalf. Elise's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on a man in his late 50s. The resemblance was uncanny. He had the same kind eyes, the same gentle strength. After the ceremony, Elise approached him, her heart pounding just as it had in the bell tower all those years ago. She introduced herself, and as she spoke, the man's eyes widened in recognition. His father had told him all about her. He explained that after the war, Jingluk had been too haunted by his experiences to return to his old life. He had moved away, started a new family, and carried the weight of his past in silence, never knowing what became of the brave librarian. But he never forgot her. He told his son stories of a brilliant, courageous woman who was the heart of their operation. In that moment, Elise's world shifted. Jingluk had survived. He had lived a full life. He had a family. The grief she had carried for over 50 years was replaced by a wave of overwhelming relief and joy. His son handed her a small, worn photograph. It was Zhongluk, older, smiling, standing in front of a new bakery. On the back, in his familiar handwriting, were a few words. To Elise, my guiding light, thank you. That secret meeting in the bell tower had set in motion a chain of events that defined both of their lives. It led to incredible bravery, heartbreaking sacrifice, and decades of silent uncertainty. But in the end, it led to this moment of connection, of closure. The story of the baker and the librarian was finally complete. Their noble hearts, once bound by secrecy and war, We're now connected again through memory and a legacy of courage that would never be forgotten. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to Noble Hearts Stories and ring the bell so you never miss a tale of courage and connection. See you next time.